Good morning, everyone. I will be serving as your host for this panel discussion. My name is Robert Sheffield. I am the president of Core Learning, and we're going to take a few more moments to let everyone that wants to join this room to get into the room, and then we'll be started with our panel discussion. Today, I'll be joined by four distinguished colleagues that are leading school systems right now through many of the types of transitions that we've been talking about today. I'm joined by Romy Trigg-Smith from Oakland Unified, also joined by Carlen Powell from Los Angeles Unified, Don Austin from Palo Alto Unified, and then finally Chris Ann Horsley, who just recently retired from Bonita Unified. So each of those folks will have a few moments to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about their district, what's going on, and a couple of the lessons that they want to focus on as they're talking a little bit about the stories that are happening within their communities. So I'm going to open up the floor for Romy to start, and then after Romy, we'll move to Carlen. Thank you, Romy.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Romy, Director of Early Literacy for Oakland Unified School District, former principal of Greenleaf TK through 8. And I actually transitioned to this role in the summer of 2020 during the height of the pandemic. And my role and my team of 4 early literacy coaches was actually created for a laser focus on early literacy across our district. I'm incredibly proud of the work that our teachers, tutors, leaders have done over the past 2+ years, given the context of the pandemic, everything that's gone on. I won't go through that and put everyone through that trauma again. But I think a lot of the reason for our work and the big shift that we've made in Oakland is because our superintendent really laid out a strategic plan that included early literacy. So one of the 4 initiatives that she has is actually ensuring strong readers by 3rd grade based on our 1819 SBAC scores, only having 1/3 of our 3rd graders reading. We knew we had to do something different. We knew we had to invest in early literacy. And one of the first things I noticed as I transitioned into this role is that we actually didn't really have a North Star. We didn't have an articulated vision around what we wanted to see in the classroom for our babies. So we actually spent that first year really defining for ourselves with teachers, with leaders, with community members, with different stakeholders, what do we want to see? And we created a new TK5 language and literacy framework that included essential elements based, of course, in Common Core standards, but articulated the foundational literacy, the structured literacy, the language development, both designated and integrated, the assessment, the differentiation, the standards-based task in complex text. All of those pieces we made sure to include in this framework so that we could set expectations for our teachers about what we wanted to see in the classroom. And actually part of that undertaking was a big curriculum adoption for us. We had this big shift from what we were using units of study and FMP into what we're using now, and we didn't waver. We knew we wanted to make this shift because we knew the curriculum that our teachers were using is what was really going to support them in making shifts for their students. And so we did the curriculum review, we did the piloting process, and actually last year was our first full year of district-wide pushing through EL education in our spaces. And I think someone actually mentioned in the chat earlier, it's not enough just to have the right curriculum, right? We have done a lot of work investing in our educators as part of the focus areas of our strategic plan and providing professional learning. So one of the things that we created was a Language and Literacy Institute, unpacking our vision, but also providing training around our curriculum. We're using SIPs for foundational skills, Heggerty, EL education, but also curriculum agnostic learning. So we wanted to make sure that our teachers and our leaders understood the why, the rationale for the shifts that we were making. So we sent some folks to Core Reading Academy, but we also did our own internal Science of Reading professional development that we then went into sites and supported their teachers and leaders learning. And so a lot of learning with our coaches, our TSAs, and professional learning communities. One of our focus areas of the strategic plan is also putting families in the driver's seat. And we're working with some partner organizations to bring in our parents and our community members into our classrooms as K-2 tutors, literacy liberators, training them up on the science of reading and having them support and differentiated foundational skill groups for our students, also providing them with SIPs. Training. And we also transitioned our entire assessment system. So one of our other focus areas is using data to make the best decisions. And we knew we needed different information. So we changed what we were using. We kind of overhauled our system, made sure that we had a universal screener, made sure we were doing dyslexia screening, but also progress monitoring so that our teachers really had tools to make pivots in the classroom, but our school leaders also in their school building. And so I think when asked what are some lessons that I really take away, and I feel like we're still in early days as we're continuing to make this transition, is really that idea and the premise of you don't do better until you know better, right? The part of like me on this journey was actually our work started in an early literacy cohort where we got to do deep learning around Scarborough's rope, shuffle binds, a simple view of reading, and how that applied to what we are doing first in my school building as a principal, and then of course district-wide. And so really thinking through that learning piece, and I think Kareem really highlighted this, but also from all different levels, right? What is the learning that we're doing with our parents and family workshops? What are the learning that we're doing with our central leaders? What is the learning that we're doing with our site leaders that we know are essential for galvanizing their site-based staff? And then of course, what are we doing with our teachers and supporting them constantly with learning, curriculum agnostic learning, but also curriculum-based learning so that they have the tools to do what we want them to do with the curriculum that we provide. So with that, I think I probably ran over and I will pass it back to you, Robert.
Thank you so much, Romy. And Don is up next. Excuse me, Carlen is up next, and then Don will follow Carlen. Thank you so much. All right, Don, do you mind go ahead and stepping in at this point? I'm not hearing from Carlen.
No problem. All right, let's let's just jump right in then. Thanks. I'm Don Austin, superintendent of the Palo Alto Unified School District. For those unfamiliar, we're about 10,500 students, probably best known for being the home of Stanford University. Unfortunately, also historically have failed low wealth and underrepresented students in a variety of areas, but the one that we really felt needed our immediate attention was reading. So one thing I'd like to start with is we're asked sometimes how to get the ball rolling when you want to make significant change in a district. Does it require a superintendent or does it require an advocate? And in our case, I'll just tell you, for all of our board members that are out there listening today, the best way to start a change is by presenting information and data and then asking questions. And the better the questions, the harder it is to have those questions go ignored. And in our case, we had two board members that really stood out. The first was relentless in her questioning and presenting of information around dyslexia. And at that point in time, what I learned was dyslexia is a lever. And, you know, depending on the reports you look at, it can easily be affecting 15+% of the population. What we learned is once we started jumping in and doing the screening work, and especially now that we've gotten better at the screening, it's right about 10% of our population is dealing with dyslexia. And if you don't know that, the chances of that student having successful supports is about zero. So that was very important. The second board member, and there was certainly some crossover, especially with these two, would present data routinely about the disproportionate results that we had for students. Now, in our district, a lot of the students come advantaged and prepared from day one. And, you know, honestly, we do a good job with students, but that wasn't where we needed to focus our effort. we were really struggling mightily with students who weren't advantaged. So students in our case, low wealth Hispanic students were performing very poorly, less than a quarter at grade level. And at about the same time, the niche rankings came out. And if you're from California, you know what those are. You look at those rankings of your school district. If you rank high, you think they're valid. And if you don't, then they're less valid. But Palo Alto is ranked the #1 school district in the state of California. And while it was fun for a little bit to brag about that, and we do put that on our website, we also had board members again and really started making me think about this. How can you be a #1 school district if you have a quarter of your kids reading at grade level that need our help the most? And that was just a total disconnect. So we dug in, and in the words of the quarterback, Tom Brady, winners and losers start with the same goals. And I hear that all the time, because what lacks after that are the action steps. So I just want to touch on the action steps that we took here so far, just quickly. Our Board of Education adopted a priority goal. We only have 5 in our entire district, of 3rd grade reading outcomes for our students, specifically each of the subgroups that we were struggling with. We appointed a director of early literacy, and I think you're going to hear that as a theme, as a really important piece of any plan, is to have a point person to keep and maintain that focus. So in this scenario, we had two places where that focus came. Our Board of Education adopted one of our 5 priority goals, and the early appointment of an early literacy director who was respected in the district and had a fantastic background. Next, we trained every one of our K-3 teachers in Orton-Gillian or OG methodology. And in fact, when you got a month into the school year, if you had not attended the 5-day training, you were pulled from your classroom and could not go back in your classroom until you had completed the training. That's how serious we treated this. The next thing that we did is we screened every student for dyslexia. All students, with follow-up meetings for any student who showed markers for dyslexia, to see if the markers were true, and if so, how we can get them to additional help. We did adopt a new ELA curriculum, and we are just in the early implementation stages, but we did drop the units of study and did a complete ELA adoption that was centered completely around the reading component. So the reading component drove the adoption process. We also shifted our assessment from the BAS to iReady. That is the tool that we use now. We think that it gives us more detailed information. Our three priority goals, 2 of which are tied to the CASP, our state test. One is ELA in general, and the second is the reading subset. And then our 3rd priority goal is progress made through, in this case, iReady assessments. And the last piece, and this is just another one of those things where you get into something and you're looking for the magic bullet. The magic bullet doesn't exist. It's a combination of efforts. And the last thing we just did is, for every student who was more than a grade level behind in reading, we sent out our team to assess their hearing and vision. And we found that 10% of the students that we went out and screened needed glasses or some kind of correction that they didn't currently have. So if you look at that, 10% of kids needed glasses, and that's going to help get them back maybe in a level playing field. Roughly 10% of the kids had dyslexia. You start to see that starts to chip away. And the last thing we did here, and we're still working on this is a little more challenging, especially if you're coming from certain programs. We're not afraid to say science of learning. Science of reading. You have to be able to say, if you can't say the words, you can't do the work. So those are the progressions, the first steps, and I'm sure we'll go a little more in depth as we get into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you when we come back up. So Chris Ann is up next, and we have resolved Carlen's audio problem, so she'll be ready to go after Chris Ann. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. Let me introduce myself. I'm Chris Ann Horsley, a recently retired curriculum director from Bonita Unified School District, which serves the cities of San Dimas and Laverne in Southern California. BUSD is known for receiving recognition from the Reading Coalition for the state test scores that placed us #1 for third grade Hispanic at-risk student reading scores in the state in 2018. And I'm here today to tell you the lessons we learned from moving from one science of reading school to an entire district focused on reading. I was the principal of that one reading school, Shoal Elementary, and we dove into foundational skills and science of reading way back in 2000 with that National Reading Panel information. It kind of helped boost us into it. We were highly successful using foundational reading skills in increasing our test scores, and we earned over the years 3 California Gold Ribbon Awards, 2 National Blue Ribbon Awards, and our scores were so consistent and continued to rise so much where the district just had to recognize that what we were doing was making a difference for students. And so the district decided on a district-wide reading project by about 2009. Our goal was for 90% of students to read proficiently by third grade. And our district school board and superintendent supported that goal. They advertised that goal. They supported us with some board policy like extra reading at home required for every grade level. And but I do have like 6 or 7 points of things that we learned from this quest, and we're still in it. First, educate your staff district-wide. All your classified and certificated staff needs some really good science of reading articles, books, and really good presentations. Everybody benefits when you make the team global and everybody's involved. Do the education yearly for your new staff and use outside trainers like CORE or SIPs from Collaborative Classroom until you have the inside trainers developed, and then you can rely on those. Be very patient because the quality of leadership from principals and other staff may vary in terms of their openness. And so you have to be very persistent with the trainers. And some educators are more fearful of change than others. And one element here that I will share is that you have to educate teachers and principals that it is okay for districts to adopt supplemental materials or core materials that are different from the recommended adoptions from the state. That information is on the state websites, on the FAQs for instructional materials. It is okay to do it. We adopted SIPs to meet the foundational skill standards K-3 and weren't using the benchmark material that we'd also adopted. And we followed legally the state process in order to do that. Invest in reading intervention teachers. We didn't start with a reading intervention teacher. Now there are reading intervention teachers across the district. And sometimes I can look back and go, the benefit of not starting with reading intervention teachers is that every teacher had to own it K-3. Every teacher had to know the science of reading and how to teach themselves in the classroom and continue to do so. You can't have reading intervention teachers come in and then the teachers rely on them to do the important work. Provide teachers then obviously with extensive training on giving assessments, evaluating assessment data on phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, reading comprehension, all that, and develop an RTI or SST process to support ever-changing data from students. So the schools are a little different, but they're revisiting data about their students changing groups every 3 to 6 weeks. And lastly, very important for your K-3 teachers, many of them need training on small group instruction and doing rotations in a classroom, which is a key to bringing in those the foundational reading skills. And recognize your staff along the way for every little step and every major step forward. We did a lot of celebrations. We wanted everybody to know how important this work was and what a difference they would make in the lives of children. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Chris Ann. You've shared a number of great lessons with us, and we'll get a chance to dive more deeply into those within a few minutes. Carlen is now ready to go. I see that her camera's on, and Carlen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'll also start off with an introduction. So I'm Carlen Powell. I work in LAUSD's Division of Instruction. That's the office of our Chief Academic Officer. My role is the Administrator of Elementary Instruction. So my team and I support all curricular areas from TK to 5th and 6th grade at elementary schools. I'm going to tell you a little bit today about the phenomenal work that our elementary literacy team is doing to promote the science of reading in LAUSD. And I'll start by saying that I noticed some similarities from all of the districts that have shared in the strategies and the approaches and sometimes even the resources. So those will kind of be our key takeaways about how to move this work along in our respective districts, but for others, you know, in implementing the work. So maybe just to start a little bit, I heard someone talk about their strategic plan and their board goals, making this work primary. We also have that, you know, in place in LAUSD. You were able to hear from our superintendent about our strategic plan, the priorities and the pillars. I find that this literacy work lives in our strategies for high quality instruction and eliminating opportunity gaps. We do have a board goal around literacy, and particularly in addition to goals on, you know, SBAC achievement and, you know, A through G achievement, we have a 3rd grade literacy achievement goal that all of our grades reach into. Kinder, 1st, 2nd, right? All of those grades help you build that and reach that 3rd grade literacy goal. We do have a solid foundation for assessment. It's been in place for quite some time in our district. We use DIBELS. DIBELS as an assessment that really allows our teachers to do one-on-one assessments with students that give really actionable data on where students are on that literacy continuum. Is there a need in phonological awareness? Is there a need in phonics? Is there a need in fluency? And they're able to really look in and you know, match the instruction to what students need. I heard the speaker right before me talk about the need to really look into adopting materials that are aligned to the science of reading approach, and that you don't have to rely on that state adopted list. So we, one thing I'll say is that our size is something that impacts how we roll out and how we implement and the time that it takes us to permeate our system. We have, you know, I like to tell people for context, we have 13,000 elementary teachers alone. That's just at the, you know, at the elementary level. We have, you know, 300,000+ elementary level students. There's a lot of students and a lot of teachers, a lot of individuals to reach. So it requires us to do our work over time, to do things in phases, but to come back and do that follow-up support to help folks deepen the work. So we have moved, we have over 500 elementary schools, so about 520 elementary schools, and we have moved over half of them to a curriculum that's aligned to the science of teaching reading, because like one of the previous speakers said, it is really important that you start with that solid foundation, right? That the materials, the resources that schools are using promote the science of reading. So not EL education for us, like my Oakland partners, but for us, core knowledge, language, arts. That we have, you know, over 200 schools moving in that direction or implementing that curriculum. And then where we have schools in other curricula, we provide those supplemental resources to replace that foundational skills instruction, be it Haggerty or 95% materials. And then in some cases, we have folks using SIPs. I think we're running a small pilot with some of our interventionists using SIPs to support instruction. We are also really leaning on curriculum agnostic training for teachers. Someone said it's so important for the training that we have for teachers for us to use both interventionists, coaches and specialists, but also to shore up that tier 1 instruction. So we're really working hard in that area. For us, that foundational learning for teachers is coming from 2 different streams. So we really like the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. That's that course that was designed by Louisa Cook Moats and other specialists in literacy. It really goes through all of those strands of Scarborough's rope, right? What a comprehensive literacy instruction would look like. And it's a 2-year learning program for our teachers. So we have teachers throughout our system engaged in the letters course, and we are growing our own trainers. So each year we have a bigger and bigger cadre of our teachers who are able to facilitate, the in-person, the synchronous debriefs around the learning. And then we also have teachers engaging in Orton Gillingham training. I wish we could do everybody all at once right away. We're not able to do that, but we are rolling out. So we have for Orton Gillingham instruction, we are in our 3rd year. And so we have an initial learning package, and then each subsequent year we have implementation support that involves teachers, schools, administrators being in a PLC, learning together, doing case studies, developing, revisiting their literacy action plan based on the data that they're seeing at their school site. So we do have Orton Gillingham in play. And then we see the structure of the science of reading, that structured literacy approach, that clear, consistent, comprehensive instruction as the umbrella. And we're providing different experiences for teachers and educators that we feel are all related. So one thing that our fabulous literacy team has developed, we call them bite-sized PDs, but they're really like small chunks of learning. We're pulling something from letters, taking it, making it really comprehensible and immediately actionable. So you can dive into this bite-sized PD and go right back in the classroom, try it out, practice it, put it in play. And then we know that a shift in mindset is what is important to this work. I heard someone say, Austin, you say we have to embrace the term science of reading. We can't be afraid to say it. So we know that we need to make sure that throughout our system, everyone understands the science of reading, the purpose, the benefits, the research behind it. So we've been engaging in book study around Shifting the Balance. Right. That's the book about bringing the science of reading into your classroom, because we want to make sure that that mind shift is in play. And then we have a big cadre of reading interventionists. So we have an initiative called Primary Promise, and we have about 300 specialists that are working at our highest priority schools, providing small group instruction. All of their training, every material, every resource that they use is grounded in the science of reading. They're really leaning into the multisensory strategies to support all students. And it's about that teamwork. I heard people say it over and over again between the regular classroom teacher and any interventionist you might have. Our Primary Promise data in terms of progress monitoring growth and benchmark assessment growth is something that we're really seeing as a highlight for our district. So interventionists, as well as shoring up tier 1 instruction, changing mindsets with our book study. We even have our own micro-credential program. So we have an early literacy foundations micro-credential program. We're on our 3rd cohort of teachers. All of their learning is grounded in the science of reading. So I feel like I can really confidently say that LAUSD has embraced the science of reading, and we're using that as the groundwork for everything that we do. When we look at materials to bring into our school sites, we're making sure that there's that science of reading strong foundation. Every conversation around literacy, classroom walks and visits, principal meetings, work with our local districts. We're all building this common language and understanding about what the science of literacy, science of reading is, and what does that look like in your classroom, and how do you coach and support the implementation there. So those are a few things that LAUSD is doing to promote the science of reading. And I feel like we were really building on some work we did pre-pandemic. We had an initiative called the Early Language and Literacy Plan, where we really helped teachers and schools to provide small group instruction, to use their DIBELS data, and to, team, to use their human resources really well to team across classrooms. So we're building upon that work. And our barriers would be our size, the number of people we need to reach. If we could do something differently, I would love to train all the teachers at once, all the administrators at once, all the school sites at once, and have everyone on the same curriculum all at once. But we're finding we have to do that phased approach to really get it done and bring it across the system. Just a few highlights of what we're doing in LAUSD.
All right, thank you so much, Carlen, and thank you so much to all the panelists. Let's go ahead and jump into a couple of questions. We've got just short of 10 minutes left. And the first question is really in regards to your own personal leadership journey towards developing an understanding of the science of reading, and then how are you also mobilizing other leaders? So I got a chance to hear Carlen talk about that from the LAUSD perspective in her last 2 or 3 minutes of her commentary, but love to hear the other panelists kind of lean into how did you get exposed to the science of reading, and then how have you been influencing other leaders in your system to also develop their understanding of the science of reading so that they can be a part of the movement that you're building?
I'll jump in, Robert. This is Chris-Ann. I came from a background of teaching as an adjunct instructor at the University of Laverne. So I taught methods courses, and I was really, really interested in having my teachers to be learn how to teach using research-based methods and materials. So that's how I came to the science of reading, was a true belief that our kids should only be given the best, be given curriculum and methodologies that research shows are highly effective with students. So the way that I approached this with my own staff and then across the district was truly training. And I used to start the same video that Kareem Weaver showed us this morning with Marva Collins, and then a series of books, the 90% reading goal and annual growth, catch-up growth. They're by Lynn Fielding. You can get them on Amazon. They're terrific. Another great resource that we used was How to Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and that's available on Amazon for $17. And let me tell you, the first 17 pages of that can change the lives of a staff just by reading it and diving in. So it's really finding what you can connect with and then spreading the word wherever you have the opportunity, whether it's at giving board presentations or presentations to staff, presentations to parents. I had running data and great reading quotes going at every parent meeting for all the years that I was a principal, because you got to motivate those parents. Once you get the kids reading, you got to keep them reading.
Thank you. And Chris-Ann, can you put the names of those books in the chat? We've got a couple of people that are asking for those.
Sure.
And Romy, if you don't mind, go ahead and jump in and offer your perspective.
Yeah, no, I started my journey, I think, way back when I started as a first grade teacher, and having to learn to pass the RECA, reading the natural reading panel that Kareem was sharing about. But I think on this journey as a principal, when we did our cohort work, so we had the Rainin Foundation external funder support 16 schools doing really deep work. My first year as a principal in 2016, so I think it was 5 years. And so we were able to do our teachers, and we had a coach. We were able to do the core reading academy for leaders. And then when I transitioned into this role and we started to support more dissemination, to support our shift from F&P and the units of study, we did the core reading academy with teachers. And so I was able to do that as well. So my own personal journey. And then we also have 10 of our schools are early lit state block grant schools because of, unfortunately, being part of the lowest 75 performing across the state of California. And so I've been able to participate in letters as well. But I do think in that thought process that I feel like we've all had is like, how do we disseminate this information? I think we've, not funded necessarily letters or core reading academy for everybody, but we've tried to turnkey and kind of create our own science of reading professional development that uses the brain research that highlights, right, the processing that happens, but also highlights the shift and like the why behind our move from the 3 cueing system to structured literacy, Scarborough's rope, all the different frameworks. And so we've tried to really disseminate that curriculum agnostic professional development in alignment with our literacy and language framework that I think has really supported mobilization. But I think mobilization around, new curriculum, new implementation of teaching strategies really also comes from a coherent instructional system of focus, right? So being able to have central coaches that go in, can do PD for all of our 50 elementary schools, but also go and step into a site to give very context specific professional development, to be able to model lessons, to be able to have the content knowledge in the curriculum and the curriculum agnostic content knowledge to give observation feedback, to meet with principals around implementation. Where are you? We used to use this frame, the learn it, expect it, support it, monitor it, right? Have you done the learning you need to do at site? As a principal, as a leader, have you been able to set clear expectations about what you expect to see in the classroom? Are you in the supported phase? Like, what are we doing in our PLCs to have cycles of inquiry around the work that we're doing and use our assessment to drive our instruction? And I also think a really coherent, clear comm strategy. I think that we might not want to say it in that way, but like the fact that we have been really persistent and consistent with, we want this to be a citywide and a community-wide campaign. We don't want it just to be internal. We want our families, our partner organizations all on board with us. So we created our Rooted in Reading newsletter where we send to external, internal stakeholders like updates, student outcome data updates, as well as implementation updates, as well as just updates around our focus areas in the strategic plan. And we do that sharing to our board. So we go into, and we have one coming up, we go into our board saying, this is the progress that we've made over trimester 1 and student outcome, as well as our implementation. And then we hold community meetings. So my first year, we held monthly community meetings where we brought all of our community in and we would share, this is what we're trying to do. This is our new framework and part of Let's Get Aligned, right? And this alignment idea, so we could hear from them feedback. And I think mobilizing is also about making sure that there's feedback loops for our educators. What are we hearing from our teachers on the ground about what is working and what they need? So we had a whole listening campaign last winter where we brought in focus groups. We do surveys all the time, right? But we brought together our principals, we brought together our teachers in each grade level and asked them, how is the adoption going? What do you need? How can we support? How can we shift our organizational levers from our central office to really make sure that we're making an impact with your ground level work? So those are a few things.
Thank you, Romy. And because we have a couple of minutes left, I'm going to toss this question over to Don and Carlen. There's a question that came in from the chat where a person is interested in learning, how have you all gotten your bargaining units to the table to have a discussion about the types of professional development that are necessary in order to really make this transformation happen within your communities? So just love to hear any perspectives in regards to the ways in which you're working with your bargaining units.
I'll be happy to start there. It can be a challenge. So I think that answer is going to differ depending on where you're at. And especially if you're transitioning from something to something else, if you're tweaking, making revisions in an existing system, it's probably not that challenging. If you're making a transition from something that's been in place for 10 plus years, you should expect resistance. The trap, and I'll just speak from my own seat for a second. I came out of high schools. I've been an administrator for much longer than I was in the classroom. Early literacy is not my specialty area, but here I am having to lead a school district in identifying an issue. So I've tried to lead with questions. Sometimes questions are just impossible to blow off. the question about, what do you read? Emily Hanford, I read what she writes. I listen to her podcast. And even the things I don't necessarily understand because it's not my expertise, I can then go and ask these questions. The same is true with your bargaining units. I think the more you can make it a conversation, the better. But the reality is, in some cases, you're going to have resistance that you're going to have to work through. And that's not unique to this topic. It's just going to be at what level are you willing to push through when things get tough? And at what point can you say, okay, I understand we have a difference here, but how can we defend the results we're getting? And if you can at least get to that point, you have a chance of moving forward. I think that's the longer you can have a conversation, ask questions, the better you're going to be.
I would just chime on and say I agree with the conversation. So for example, I know we do regular check-ins with our, the senior leaders of our labor union. I think they're supportive of the move. We have that shift in curriculum to some schools moving to CKLA. And I think, as we explained how we were following a process that is okay, with the state, it's okay to use a curriculum that's not adopted, and that state process involves engaging stakeholders in the review of the curriculum. I think that yields some buy-in. Some of the challenges that we've had in LAUSD in terms of getting the training to everyone are guidelines in the contract about when you make something mandatory, like what has to be in place. You have to, you have to offer it maybe, out of work for a certain pay rate. You have to have an opportunity for sub-release. As well. So if people can't do it out of work, they can, be released for, job embedded training. And with our shortages, with substitutes and lack of staff, that has made it difficult. But I think that when you listen to teachers, I heard someone saying, listen to people and what they want. Part of our move to that new curriculum came from listening to our micro-credential teachers. They said, we're doing this great training on the science of reading. We're learning how to use other assessment. We're learning how to tailor the instruction, but we need something to start with that aligns to everything that we're learning. So I think that as we, have those conversations and incorporate the feedback and listen to the field, it helps in that way.
Thank you so much. And we just got a note that we've got about 4 more minutes left. So what I'd like to do is just kind of move us towards our closing frame. And for our panelists, if there are any particular points that you believe are most important for our participants to hear about your implementation or about perspectives on implementation, I'd love to be able to capture those at this point in time. So I'm thinking about that one big coaching lesson that you would give to a new superintendent that's taking on this initiative, or a literacy coordinator at the district office that's taking on this type of initiative. What would that coaching guidance be? I'd like to hear from each of you all before we wrap up. Thank you. So Romy, you go first, please.
No thought time. No, I would definitely say when embarking on this is every context is different, right? So doing your own root cause analysis about, your scores and your data. I think Dawn was speaking about like that data dive and like, why are we at the status quo that we don't want, and what are our levers to move? And so for us is really looking, I spoke to that coherent instructional system. So we have, and it's in a graphic, I wish I could share it, maybe I will, different gears that we say are all levers to help us move the work of literacy and make this big shift. One of them being quality standards-based curriculum, right? A really comprehensive assessment system, foundational PD, curriculum-based ongoing professional learning, on-site coaching, and tiered supports, and which of these pieces aren't in place. So if you're in our situation, you might look back and several of them aren't in place, but starting with that quality curriculum standards-based quality standards-based curriculum, and then working with those other levers. So I think that I will leave us with that since we have such short time, and pass it to someone else.
All right, Chris Ann, please. Thank you.
I would close with saying that your data is going to tell a story, and that story is going to be able to help move everything forward. And let me just give you an example. I worked with a set of 3 kindergarten teachers one fall, got them using SIPs. They'd been resistant to it before. I had the data from the previous year where they started the year with 18 at-risk students, And by the middle of the year, their data showed that had grown to 28 out of their 3 classes. The first year that they used SIPs with some really good coaching, we tracked that data. They started the year again with 18 strategic and intensive intervention children. And by that second benchmark, they were down to 3. And those teachers, they said, that changed their lives as teachers. One of them, who was thinking about retiring, wanted to teach more years. Another one said to me, why didn't anyone ever teach me this? Why did I not know how to teach kindergartners how to read? So the power is in getting the program in there, monitoring that data and showing teachers that data, and they will move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And Don, final closing thoughts?
No pressure. The closing thoughts. Yeah, I think teaching reading is complicated, right? It's why we've struggled with it for so long. There are differences of opinion and approach, and just how we get there is different everywhere you look. So I'd say this: keep the things that can be simple. Pre-identify your metrics so that you know what success looks like before you get into it. Otherwise, on the back end of whatever you put in place, people will assign their own meaning and value to it. So it's really important to be thoughtful, concrete, very specific, and I'd say targeted. So, the big blanket, a giant percentage of our kids are going to be at or above grade level is fine. But it's better when you can drill in and say, okay, where are targeted efforts? And then when you have those results that come back, can you point to concrete actions that you took? Can others replicate it? When you bring new people into your system, are they trained? Is this a 1-2 year push? And in 10 years, you've turned over 40% of your staff and they don't understand this push. So just be relentless, focused, and as simple as you can make it.
All right, thank you. And Carlen, you have the last words.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm going to agree with, everyone before me. I'm still reflecting on, some LAUSD, what would we do different? So if that at all possible, when you do this work, if you can, address everyone at the same time, right? Get everyone on the same page with common training, required training for all. And a coherent message across the system, right? That's going to help support the work. Like just for LAUSD, I would love to have everybody on the same curriculum because it supports that, cross collaboration across schools, across regions, across all stakeholders. So do that when you can, plan for that, put that in your planning process, allow yourself the time and the space to do it that way. And then I would also say that I heard someone say, make some goals for yourself. And I would say make long-term and incremental goals. I know that there is an urgency to do this work. Our children don't get years back, right? They don't get the first grade back. They don't get the second grade back. We have to move the work forward each and every year, but also to change the whole system, to change what's happening in every classroom, to change the experience for every student. That will take time. And you have to give yourself the permission, right, to have that time while you're making those incremental steps. So I would say that. And then lastly, engage with stakeholders. So be it the parents or the community. We have a strong advocacy group that we work with around this literacy work, around structured literacy, around supporting all students. They bring the passion and the urgency, and they help to remind us to keep pushing forward for students. So the partnership in doing the work.
Thank you so much to each one of our panelists for taking some time to share with us. And also thank you as participants for joining us. We're going to transition into our next breakout. I see Dr. Christopher back with us, so I'm going to pass the microphone back over to him. And thank you all and have a great afternoon.